Welcome to part Digesting 2.
You happy? You ready to go? Can I have a microphone?
Can you say it?
Alright. Say bye, Freddie. Say bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Because you're going.
And
Bye. Thank you, Freddie. Alright. So, as he said, digestion part 2. And we're going to kick off with hypothetically speaking, there. We're going to kick off with another fad diet. The alkaline diet. This is appropriate because we just talked about stomach acid. So the idea of the alkaline diet is that, and again, this is the premise, not necessarily reality. The premise is that when you metabolize food, you're extracting the chemical energy from food. And okay, fair. But the premise is that actually you're burning the food in sort of a slow, controlled manner. And when you burn anything, there's a residue, ashes. The ashes can be alkaline, they can be acidic depending on what you're burning. The alkaline diet restricts food that leaves an acidic residue. So things like meats and animal products, grains, alcohols. People who do this make some bold claims, not just weight loss, but it can fight cancer. Okay. So there's a lot wrong with this, and not just that it restricts alcohol. The pH of your blood is between 7.35 and 7.45. We've already talked about this, and nothing you're eating is going to change this because your blood is a buffer. Not only is your blood a buffer, we have the respiratory and the renal physiological buffers to help manage that. So, yeah, you'd have to take a Costco-sized bottle of antacids to change the pH of your blood. Now, you may change the pH of urine. Drink straight-up cranberry juice, like not the cranberry cocktail crap, but the straight cranberry juice. You can make the urine more acidic, but not by a lot because there's a phosphate buffer there in the urine. So, to think that somehow your diet has an effect on the pH of your body, your blood, is wrong. Also, don't confuse digestion with combustion. We are extracting the chemical energy from the food that you eat, but we are not burning it. We use that analogy a lot. We say we're burning oxygen or we're burning calories. You're not literally starting a fire. It is a chemical reaction, but it is not a combustion thing. We're not getting ashes. Do we produce heat? Yes. It's a chemical reaction, but we're on a molecular scale here. We're not lighting tiny fires in your cells. People who do this that have lost weight, and this is true with any diet, when you lose weight on these diets, it's typically due to caloric restriction. And this is true for any diet. I can tell you right now to go on the no cheese diet. And if your diet currently contains a lot of cheese products, well, you're going to lose some weight because you just cut those calories out. If you drink Coke, stop. You're going to lose some weight because you just cut those calories out. So, caloric restriction is a thing, and you'll lose weight by definition if you're doing more work than you're bringing in calories. And this is what happens here. I mean, if you go back and look, like we're cutting out meats and things made from animals and most grains and alcohol, like what's left? Legumes and plants and vegetarian stuff. Okay, and this is the same. Like right now, if you're not a vegetarian and you decide to be a vegetarian, you're gonna lose some weight because you just cut all those animal product calories out. If you want to go gluten-free today and you cut out everything that's got gluten in it, you're gonna lose some weight because you cut all those calories. And there's not a, it's not like you're replacing it with the calories from apples or whatever. So anything that's cutting something out of your diet, you're going to lose some weight. Moving on. The small intestine is where most stuff is going on. This is the action part of your digestive tract. It's divided into 3 parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. There's the small intestine. So the duodenum is an important part of this. Now it's just the first segment of the small intestine, but this is where stuff from the stomach is going to come. So here's where it's connected to the stomach. Here. You can see the pancreas, the liver, pancreas, gallbladder, the ducts coming in here and here. This is the major duodenal papilla, the hepatopancreatic sphincter, formerly called the sphincter of Oddi. Dumping those things in here. This is where it all begins. Now, notice these little circular folds through here. This is going to create sort of a rifling or spiral motion throughout the small intestine. The food chyme has to make a loop through there because it spins as it goes through that. It's also increasing the surface area of the small intestine, which is important for digestion and absorption. We've got villi, we've got microvilli. The surface area of your small intestine would easily cover 2 tennis courts. So let's look. We can see the little microvilli, the villi, and then these circular folds forcing this to spiral through the small intestine. Now here are blood vessels carrying the blood that's going to drain from the small intestine out to the liver through the hepatic portal. More on the hepatic portal shortly. So, villi, microvilli, there to increase, oops, I should plug this thing in, increase the surface area of the small intestine. Along those microvilli, we're going to see what are called brush border enzymes in the cell membranes. So, cytokines here, this is a bit too much detail for us, so we're going to pass on this. Here we see the little intestinal crypts, those little things right here. And just like we had in the stomach, we've got some endocrine cells there, releasing chemicals that signal activity in the small intestine. Go back. These green things are lymphatics, lacteals. This is going to be a part of how we absorb lipids. There are glands here, duodenal glands, that secrete an alkaline mucus to immediately help neutralize that stomach acid. That stomach acid's coming in at a pH of like 1.5. The stomach has a mucosal barrier to protect it from that acid. The small intestine does not, nor does the esophagus for that matter, if acid goes back the other way. But, so that acid has to be neutralized. So we have this intestinal juice, which is alkaline, and helps neutralize the stomach acid. Around here we have the accessory organs. And the biggest of these accessory organs is the liver, the largest gland in your body. And actually the liver is the only organ that you can't live without. We have dialysis for kidneys, we have heart-lung bypass, we have respirator ventilators, things to help you breathe. There's no artificial liver. There's no liver dialysis. It just does too much. So there's the liver, right? Left lobe, right lobe. Ligament in the front is called the falciform ligament. This little tail down here is called the round ligament. It's the remnant of the umbilical vessel. On the back, you can see that round ligament again. Other lobes, there's the caudate lobe and the quadrate lobe. That square right there, that's the gallbladder. Alright, so functions of the liver. Let's make a list here. First, the liver produces bile. The gallbladder here stores bile. It concentrates bile, but the liver makes it. So you see these bile ducts coming up out of the liver. Those bile ducts drain that bile over to the gallbladder, or out through the cystic duct to the small intestine. Sorry, that's the common bile duct, not the cystic duct. The cystic duct is the one that comes to the gallbladder. This is the common bile duct going out to the small intestine. Other functions of the liver. Detoxification. Detoxification is when we take something that's toxic and we turn it into something that's less toxic. So we've got some great examples of detoxification. Let's talk here. Some little pen tool. Alright, so if we start with, say, ethanol, the liver has enzymes in these lobules of the liver, these hexagon things. The blood's going to get processed through this. And so, actually, let's move forward and then let's talk about this. So here's a liver lobule, these little hexagon things. And blood is going to drain through these. These are sinusoidal capillaries. Sinusoidal, so they've got really big holes and lots of stuff can leak out of them. So here's this. So now blood coming from that hepatic portal vein is going to drain through here, and then it's going to get worked out here. And as it is, in those cells there, those enzymes in the cell membranes are going to process this blood and take stuff out and break stuff down and modify things, and then that blood that's detoxified and processed gets drained back into this central vein and then out to the actual hepatic vein proper and back in the circulation. So it's got to process all the nutrients in the body. All the nutrients. Nutrients as they come from the intestines, there's too much. It's way too much. It's so much that it's toxic, actually. So this be still. Shh. This is Olive, and Olive is a corgi. And I bring her here now as we talk about hepatocyte functions and processing nutrients, because she doesn't do that well. Calm down. Olive is a puppy. Olive's like a month old-ish. No, Olive's probably pushing a year. Everybody loves a puppy. I don't like dogs, but I like Olive. Alright, so I'm going to hand Olive back to Noah. Alright. Alright, Olive has an issue with this hepatic portal thing. She has what's called a portocaval shunt. Wow, this is hard to write on. Let's try this again. Portocaval shunt. Alright, so what that means is that if we go back a slide, this portal vein here bypasses all of this and goes here to the vena cava. And this is on a smaller scale. Hers is on a much larger scale. So the hepatic portal vein, the big hepatic portal vein, back, well, it's not even on that diagram, back here, bypasses the liver. So blood, instead of going through this whole thing, bypasses the liver and goes straight to circulation for her. Like I said, the liver has to process all these nutrients. And what happens if it doesn't is that those amino acids are broken down and they become ammonia. And that ammonia builds up in the system and it damages the brain. So what you get are seizures. The first time Olive did this, she was probably 8 months old, 6 months old, somewhere in there. And she just flopped. I've never seen, it's not like a seizure like you'd expect. She's drooling everywhere, lots of vomiting. And it took quite a while to figure out what was going on. Hypothetically, this could be repaired surgically. That being said, there's not a surgeon nearby that can do this, and it's considerably expensive. So Olive's fine now, but Olive is a vegetarian dog. That sounds ridiculous. But we've successfully been able to treat this with diet. We avoid things that would become ammonia. So the nutrients that are coming into her blood that are still probably going to bypass the liver are things that are broken down into elements that can be absorbed in the small intestine. And they don't necessarily have to be processed by the liver. So Olive eats a lot of things that you're not supposed to feed dogs, like carbohydrates and sugary bread crap, French fries, stuff like this. It's easier for her to break down plant-based proteins than it is animal-based proteins. She can't eat dog food. It's a ridiculous situation, I know. But it was a good excuse for me to show you a puppy. But back to this idea of detox. So, detoxification. Breaking something down that's toxic and turning it into something that's less toxic. Ethanol is a great example of this. Ethanol, grain alcohol drink. Ethanol is going to be broken down to another molecule called acetaldehyde. And that acetaldehyde is going to be broken down into acetic acid. Excuse me. And then there's another enzyme that breaks that into acetyl-CoA. But we're taking something that's toxic. It's a neurotoxin. It's a central nervous system depressant. We're turning it into something that's less toxic, or in this case, non-toxic, and can be metabolized. But like any sort of enzyme pathway or protein pathway here, it's not like it's infinite. There's a finite number of these enzymes. Should you exceed them, then just like in the kidneys where we exceeded the maximum reabsorption there at the kidneys, then the rest of that toxin goes in the blood. In this case, ethanol. So when you get drunk, what you've done is you've exceeded the liver's ability to break down that ethanol. You've saturated the enzymes. What's going to be produced from all of this is bile. Bile is made from this cholesterol base, and other stuff gets worked in that's removed from nutrients. The purpose of bile is to act as an emulsifier. An emulsifier takes big pools of lipids and breaks them down into tiny little droplets that we can use. The bile salts here get recycled. Not overly worried about bile salt. Okay. The gallbladder stores and concentrates bile and releases it through the cystic duct. This is why you can go without a gallbladder. The gallbladder's not making bile, it's just storing it. The pancreas, super important organ, because the pancreas not only does the insulin glucagon thing, the pancreas has an exocrine function. This is where the digestive enzymes come from that do most of your digestion. Pancreatic juice helps neutralize that stomach acid coming in, and we have all these digestive enzymes. Now, amylase, which breaks down starch, lipase, which breaks down fat, nucleases, which break down nucleic acids, all of those are secreted in an active form. Proteases always secreted in an inactive form, because the inside of your cell also made of proteins. You don't want them active inside the cells. You want them activated once they get out there with the stuff that you ate. So there are enzymes in the small intestine then that activate the enzymes from the pancreas. Trypsinogen, again there's our suffix there, that indicates an inactive enzyme. It's activated once it's in the small intestine. So here's that pathway again. I'm not going to ask you about molecular biology on your exam. Bile secretion from secretin. There's a hormone there. Secretin is one of those really early discovered hormones. If you can hear that in the background, Olive's not the only dog, but since Olive's out now, the other dog demands attention. Lucy, however, has no relevance to this lecture, other than she's probably hungry. Lucy's a great name. She eats everything. Gallbladder contraction. Cholecystokinin, our hormone there from the cells of the intestines when that proteins and fat are exposed to those cells. Cholecystokinin makes the gallbladder contract. Alright. So again, you'll notice we're blowing through this pretty quickly because we're limited on time and just trying to get through the semester. Alright, so our next diet for this is the Atkins Diet. Dr. Atkins Diet Revolution. Dr. Atkins wrote his book in 1972, and of course the idea here is carbohydrate restriction. This is the mother of all these carbohydrate restrictive diets. So the idea here is that we switch the body's metabolic processes. We burn glucose, we go to burning fat. This is ketosis. We would also see this in a diabetic. Hold on. I apologize, I'm fighting with the computer now, which for some reason thinks it knows what I want it to do. Alright. So, ketosis. So, the principle here is sound. When you don't have any carbohydrate to burn, you've got to break down fat. That's why fat's there. It's stored energy. The ketosis part happens so that your brain doesn't die, because your brain will burn those ketone bodies. So, I mean, that's all sound. You have to burn fatty acids instead of glucose if there's no glycogen or glucose available. The latest editions of the book make the argument that the low-carb diet produces a metabolic advantage because you have to invest more energy in burning fat. That's not the case. There's no metabolic advantage. That doesn't make the principle behind this any less sound. It just means there's not a metabolic advantage. In fact, as we're there, there's no negative caloric value. There's nothing that you eat that consumes more calories than you derive from it. I suppose water, if you count like the calories necessary to drink water or swallow, there's nothing else. Like you're not celery. People like celery has negative caloric value. That's not the case. what ends up happening is that you stop eating stuff because you get tired of eating it. And this is something that I can attest to from firsthand experience. I did this when I was in grad school. The Atkins Diet, and I did the Atkins Diet proper, like as prescribed. It sucks, actually. I freaking hated it because I ingest a lot of carbohydrates constantly. And this was kind of brutal for me because I was kind of addicted to sugar. Long-term effects we don't really know. That's debatable. Some people say it contributes to cardiovascular disease. Others say that it helps prevent it. But we're not super concerned with that at the moment. What we're concerned with is its effect on your metabolism and digestion. It's not the all-you-can-eat meat and cheese diet, even though it's been publicized as such, nor is it a license to gorge. The additions to the book are very careful to explain that. It's never been the all-you-can-eat steak diet. This has, like I said, it was the forerunner for all these diets now that are carbohydrate restriction, paleo, and I don't remember all the others. Because if you don't have any carbs, your body has no choice but to burn fat. This was such a fad in the early 2000s that Krispy Kreme donut sales went down. Nothing touches that. Well, I suppose our current situation has probably affected them. But for this to affect Krispy Kreme's was a big deal. Sales of rice and pasta plummeted, and that was crazy. Prior to this, dieters went on low-fat, high-carb diets, when this was exactly the opposite. The thing with this is, like I said, it sucks. That food restriction, especially during the initial phase, you'll stab somebody for a cookie. The other people in my office would like have muffins and stuff. We were doing it as a group, and somebody brought carbohydrate-free muffins. That's a lie. Those are neither. They're not muffins. There's nothing about that that's cool. Yeah. So if you're used to eating like bread things, it is rough to start with. You introduce carbohydrates back in slowly, but initially it's rough. And ketosis is rough. It makes you think strangely, foggy, sleepy. It's hard. But for the people that stuck with it, it worked well. Alright, so back to our ideas here. Digestion, small intestine. What we've got from the stomach. Some starch is digested. A little protein broken down. Fat's not digested. So now, in the small intestine, we're going to mix it with all these enzymes and with bile. We're going to break it down chemically. Chemical digestion here. And it's going to go through the small intestine all the way down towards the large intestine. And as we go, we're going to absorb those nutrients as you broke it down. So, like I said in the beginning of this, one of the things with digestion is this misconception of how digestion works. You don't absorb food. You absorb molecules. You are going to break that food down to a molecular level. That's not a hamburger anymore. You are breaking down not just the meat and the proteins, but into amino acids. You are breaking that bread down into carbohydrates, individual polysaccharides and monosaccharides, disaccharides. We are breaking this down on a small scale. If you bring a protein in, you are going to cut that thing up into amino acids. Is it going to be reassembled on the other side in the same protein? No. So, when you ingest these proteins, they're going to get broken down. Peristalsis, small intestine, moving stuff toward the end. Alright, so here's peristalsis again. That myenteric nerve plexus is here. Again, we've talked about this before. At the very end of the small intestine, we have the ileocecal valve or the ileocecal sphincter, and what's left will get admitted to the large intestine when we have a gastroileal reflex, which is stomach, so gastrostomach, ileum. The gastroileal reflex causes the ileum to push this undigested material forward into the large intestine, or gastrin from the stomach, which also will increase the ileum motility. The valve that closes this is called the ileocecal valve. The large intestine, the only part of this that's going to end up moving a solid product. The muscle tone here is higher. There's 3 bands of smooth muscle, and there's more muscle tone here. It creates these little pouches we call haustra. It gives that large intestine its sort of characteristic shape. Let's see. This first part here is the cecum. You see the appendix attached at the end. There's your ileocecal valve. Ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, and then the rectum. Another view here. Side view. Alright, so internal, external anal sphincter, much like the urethral sphincters, not really concerned about that. What's the large intestine's function? The large intestine's function to reabsorb water. What's left here is not digestible. We're done. We're done with it. But there's a lot of water. It's a liquid when it starts in the large intestine. We're going to reclaim most of that water. And what's going to exit you is a semi-solid or solid. There's lots of bacteria there. They are going to break down stuff that you couldn't. This is not a good thing. Well, not necessarily a good thing. In that breakdown, you're going to have the release of acidic byproduct gases. You're also going to make some of the B vitamins and vitamin K. That's a good thing. But you don't necessarily want them digesting things that you couldn't, because it's fermentation, and you're going to get like methane. So, water reclamation there in the large intestine. And then getting rid of what's left. Oddly enough, you don't have to have a colon to live. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to have one. But you don't have to have one. If you don't, you're going to lose a lot of water because whatever exits your body is going to be a liquid. Alright, so the haustra, those pouches, keep moving stuff toward the end. The gastrocolic reflex, when you eat, it causes the colon to contract. If you have kids, you know this. When they eat, they have to poop. Like babies especially, you feed them and they poop. That's a gastrocolic reflex. Defecation, getting rid of all the stuff you didn't want. Not worry about pooping. Moving on. You're welcome. Actually, you're welcome. Chemical digestion is a large part of this whole thing. Things you need to remember about chemical digestion. One, it's catabolic. Meaning that we're breaking stuff down. And we're releasing energy. It's driven by enzymes and water. Here are some digestive enzymes. These all break down carbohydrates. You know, obviously you don't have to remember these. Carbohydrates are going to be absorbed through secondary active transport with sodium. And they're going to go to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. So here we see this nice little chart that shows the breakdown of carbohydrates and their absorption. Proteins. Proteins are going to be broken down into amino acids. And again, coupled to transport of sodium. Here we see that this nice little chart with the breakdown of proteins and the absorption of proteins. Lipids are a little different, because they have to be emulsified by bile first, then broken down by an enzyme, and then we absorb glycerol and those short-chain fatty acids. Some of them are going to go into the capillary blood and be transported to the hepatic portal vein. Some of them are going to cluster with bile salts and lecithin to form micelles, which are going to enter lacteals. Those tiny little lymphatic vessels in green. And then enter systemic circulation there. Not going back through the hepatic portal like other nutrients would. So here we see that. Nucleic acids, while technically it's something we eat, it's not really a nutrient, so we're not going to concern ourselves with this. Vitamins are absorbed in the small intestine, fat-soluble, water-soluble vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins by diffusion, water-soluble vitamins by diffusion with passive or active transport. Vitamin B12 is an exception to that because you have to have intrinsic factor, and then it's brought in by endocytosis. Vitamin K and vitamin B are absorbed from the large intestine. Electrolytes absorbed throughout the small intestine. Water is absorbed through the small intestine, and then the rest is from the large intestine. Anything that interferes with this is going to cause malabsorption of nutrients, damage to the intestine, anything that stops bile or pancreatic juice. One example of this is cystic fibrosis. The secretions from the pancreas are so thick it will block that duct. Celiac disease we don't really have time to get into, where gluten damages the intestinal villi of the brush border, so those enzymes can't break down nutrients. Like I said, we don't really have time to get into that. Alright, so that's where we'll stop for digestion. We'll pick up in a bit with reproduction.